All right, here's gonna be a quick, unscripted run through on the basic Forge and how to kind of get started in Forge with the very bare minimum basics. So we're gonna go over like how to spawn things and how to do some basic stuff in the node graph and kind of show how to get around and edit stuff in Forge, because there's some things that I found very unintuitive that kind of confused me at first. And it doesn't really tell you or show you that I wish it did. But so the first thing that you might want to do when you're in Forge is you want to spawn stuff and like place it around in the world. So you can do that. I'm going to be using the keyboard and mouse inputs. You can see over here in the top left the keys that I'm talking about. So when I say it, if I say the key, you can reference the top left to see what key I'm talking about. I'll try to say the name of the menu. But on keyboard and mouse, the R key will open the Forge menu. In the Forge menu is what you need, is what you want to open to like actually edit stuff and spawn things and actually create the world. So you can create a primitive block here. So you hit R, go to primitive, you can create a block. And let's say we're just going to create a normal primitive block, and it spawned where we were looking. We can come out of the object browser, make sure we're not in the object browser and we have the object selected and then it's outlined. We can actually move that object. If you press the one key by default, or I'm not sure what the hotkey would be on controller, but you can change the different tools, the different things you can do by pressing 1, 2, and 3. So the 1 key will translate things back and forth, up and down. 2 will rotate, and 3 will scale. We'll get into scaling in a minute because you can only scale dynamic objects, but we'll get to that. So you can move the object and scale it and rotate it and move it around. Now let's say you want to edit the position precisely. Or let's say you wanted to snap it to another object. So let's say we wanted to snap these two items together. Well, it's like, okay, well, you could always just kind of move them like together and like get them close and like try to get them exact. You can do that, that's possible, but what you can also do is hit the M key, and there's a magnet mode that will snap. I think it's a little buggy right now, but when you move something close enough, it will snap. And then if I unselect it, you can see that it's perfectly snapped to its buddy. And you can toggle magnets, is what it's called, with the M key. So magnets are on when you see these little cubes. Those are magnets. That means the magnet tool is on, and if things are snapping and connecting in ways that you don't mean them to, because magnets can sometimes get in the way when you don't want them, the M key will turn them on. Or here you can see it says magnets on. You can just toggle that off. I did not mean to make that. We'll get to script brains in a minute. So let's say we wanted to change the color of these objects, or change it to be a dynamic object because we wanted to like make it have physics. So what you would do to actually modify the properties of an object that you've spawned, you would select it and hit the R key or the Forge menu. And next to the object browser in the top here, there's a little cog looking symbol that will bring up the object properties. Here you can actually set the object's position and rotation and scale manually. Because right now its position is negative 12,056. Let's say we want to make it negative like 12,050 flat. And you can see that it moved closer to the other one on the x-axis that we modified. That's another thing. I didn't mean to spawn that. You can also, this might be a little confusing because we changed the x-axis here, but the x-axis wasn't pointing in that direction. The x-axis is pointing this way, not that way. Why did it move this way? And that's because over here in the movement type, it says object at the top left. If you hit F5, you can change it between the object's perspective and the world's perspective. So the x-axis for the whole level is that way. And when I moved it there, it was treating it, it was going in reference of the world space, not the local space. So if I hit 5, you'll see that it changes. So pay attention to your movement type up here and make sure that it's in world or object or the one that you're trying to move. Most of the time you probably want to be in world for this like kind of general blocking out and moving things. But being an object is really useful when you start rotating stuff. Because if I was to rotate this, and let's say I wanted to move it upwards, like I wanted to move it that way in line with its rotation, it's like, well, I'd have to like move it up and over like this, and that's annoying. But instead, you can go to object mode, and you can see now that this object is actually snapped to its rotation, and now I can move it in a straight line up and down. So pay attention to the object type that you have, the translation widget type that you're in for the kind of movement you want to do. Because like now you might want to move it straight up. Like you have the rotation of the position right, but you want to move it straight up. In world space, it's like, okay, well, doing that, you move it like this and then like this. Like, no, that's no good. Instead, what you can do is once you've got it kind of in position, you change the mode to back to world space, and then you drag it straight up. So pay attention to the movement type that you have. And if you ever, like, if things are moving in unexpected ways, double check that you're actually moving, that you're referencing the right plane or the right coordinate system, because you don't want to be in object mode. You don't want to be looking at object mode when you mean to be in world mode, and like make, it might confuse you. So just keep an eye on the movement type of objects. So that's why that's why some of that stuff might be weird. But let's change the color off that tangent. Let's change the color of these cubes, and you can do that by coming to the visual tabs. And there's 3 different regions. Now you might need to experiment with which region actually affects the object that you're working on, because multiple objects can have multiple different regions that you can change the color and material of, and you'll see this later on if you start digging down into some of the more advanced looking objects you can spawn. So like if I come over here and I so this is region 1. It appears region 1 is referring to, if I try to change the color, it's referring to the end here. Only this end is being changed by that region. Okay, I was like, that's not what we want. We want to change the sides here. So let's go region 2 and try to change its color. Let's see which side changed. So it's the other end got changed. So region 3 is the big faces of it. So let's say we wanted to change that to, like a white color, like a yellowish white, and we can do that. I don't know what just happened. I don't know why the colors are all weird. It might have something to do with the color spread of these. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't quite figured out how the different materials, I haven't experimented too much with these materials. It's just gonna be a bit of trial and error in figuring out how this system works with changing materials, but you can change all the options for the materials here and you'll eventually figure it out. I might make another video talking about this, but you can also, once you find the region that you wanted to change, you can also change its texture as well. So let's say I wanted this to look like asphalt. Well, there we go. It's now got the asphalt texture, or you can also make it look like ceramic tiles. So like there, now we have a ceramic tile floor, and this gives you the ability to like add custom floors to your maps and stuff, which is really cool because you can kind of design like a theme or like an actual aesthetic to your whole map. And in previous Forge games, at least from me coming from 3 and Reach, you didn't really have that option. All maps kind of looked the same, had the same shitty looking like flat, either all maps looked like they were a sandbox map or all maps looked like they were unfound. You had to stay within what they were giving you, or what the tools they give you. But now you can actually change them and make any look you want. You can make it look like dirt or whatever you want. But that's how you change. That's how you change the visuals. There's also scratch and grime stuff down here. Experiment with them. You'll figure it out. It's not that hard. Just a little bit of experimentation will you'll learn the different options and what they do. So we've covered moving. We've covered hitting the 1, 2, and 3 key to rotate scale. One thing we haven't covered is, by default, when you spawn an item like this, a primitive block, up here in object mode, you're going to see that it's a static object. And when I hover over it in the bottom right, it says toggles between static and dynamic objects. Static objects can be scaled, but not movable in game or scriptable. Dynamic objects are scriptable and movable in game. So later, we're going to want to reference objects in our node, script brains, our node graph, and they have to be dynamic objects to be able to be referenced inside of the script, inside of the node graph, inside of the script editor So if you're trying to reference an item and it says, it will warn you trying to say that you can't reference a static object, all you need to do is come over here to this object and click dynamic. But then you're going to realize, oh, the scale messed up. What happens here? Well, you can't scale dynamic objects. It sucks. But it's just something that we have to work around. So we have so what you can do instead is it's really small and you can't scale it. Well, there's a variance for an object. There's a 16 by 16 by 2, and if we can see that it's a big long plane with a bunch of different colors that we set before. And I don't understand why they're I don't know. So you can change its variance. And this is how you can build out a level of stuff that is dynamic. So you normally only use dynamic objects for stuff that you want to actually be moving around, like in a map like this, if you wanted to make a ramp like this, where the flag is at, most of the time, this ramp is never going to move. If you design something like this that's going to always be there, you should probably make it static. But if for any reason you need to reference that object and modify it, like delete it or change its position or add velocity to it, you want to make sure it's dynamic so that you can reference it in script. So what we're going to do is, that way we understand object, dynamic, and static, we can go on to doing a little bit of script inside of the node graph and using script brains. So all the scripting objects inside the browser exist under gameplay and then scripting. And this has everything related to scripting that you'd probably want. There might be a few things hidden else that you would want to use inside of a script somewhere, but these are the main things that you would want to use inside the world as a script. So a pointer is basically, it functions right now as an empty object. Is basically, if we read it, a pointer is an object that references a specific node graph script invisible in game. I don't know what that means. I haven't figured out a purpose for these other than that they're just invisible placeholders that you can use to reference points in the world. We'll get to that because we're going to be using one in a moment to teleport a player to. So what you can do, the other thing that you need is you need a script brain. These hold your actual code. You can have more than one of them. They all have their own unique graph. So if I was to come in and select this one, hold Q or hit the N key on the keyboard and go to the node graph, each one of these graphs that we brought up would be different for each one. So when you're editing your stuff, make sure you select the script brain that you mean to use. So I'm going to delete the other two so that we only have one. And what we're going to do is create a little example of teleporting a player when they spawn. Let's say you wanted to teleport a player to a position over here somewhere whenever they respawn. It's quite simple. It's not super useful, but it can give you an idea of how you'd go about doing stuff in the node graph. So what you do is you select your script brain, and you'd hit Q, and you'd open this here, and you get this weird fancy blank screen. It's the same hotkeys as it is in the editor. You hit the R key, and you bring up the node browser here, and you also got node properties, like how objects have also object properties, and there's also node properties. It's the same UI. You can treat it the same. You can even navigate it in a very similar way. But what we want to do is, since we want to, every time the player spawns, we want to do something. Well, what we can do is we can go events players. No, sorry, not events players. We can go events. The events tabs, it says on. Am I missing it? Hold on. Where is on player spawn? On player spawn, there it is. So inside of the events players, there's the on player spawn. It sucks because right now there is no search feature. So sometimes you might, you know what you want, but you'll have a hard time finding it because you can't search. Hopefully they add a search feature before it comes out. But what we want to do is we will have an on player spawn event. So you have you see the name of it here, and it's a big square. So a way to look at these is on the left side of the node are the inputs, and on the right side of the node are the outputs. Since this is an on-player spawn, this event here doesn't actually take an input. It's just fired every time a player is spawned. And then the outputs here, you have a little diamond and you have a little circle that is the player. So these little diamonds basically tell you what bit of code you want to execute next, and the player here is the player that spawned. So what we want to do is we want to teleport the player to a position. So I know that if we go over here to the players category, and we scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a teleport player method. So we can teleport a node, teleport player node. You can teleport a player. So as you said before, the left side is the inputs and the right side is outputs. You see, there's only a diamond output here. There's like no data outputs. There's just a little diamond to tell you to say what the script should do next. So what you do is, since when the player spawned, you want to teleport the player. So you connect the diamonds to the diamonds, and this tells this is how you tell it what to execute next. So it'll execute this, follow the diamond line to this, and then execute this. But the teleport player, it needs more to function than just this little connection. It has parameters that you need to fill in. Like, how do you teleport a player if it's empty and you have no idea what player? You just can't do it. It's going to throw you an error, and we can see that if we hit F6. So this is another thing. There's two different play modes. There's F5 to test, which will allow you to quickly test a level and walk around and shoot or whatever. And then there's also the F6, which actually plays it. It's kind of like actually starting the game. It's kind of like hitting play in a custom game. It kind of actually runs your scripts, and physics are enabled, and the node graph actually runs. But what we can see is when we hit F6, it says teleport player missing node required property, and it says that twice, which means there's two node properties that are required that are missing. It's like, okay, well, if we come over here and look, there's a player and there's a position. There's a third one, but this third one isn't required. And it's the teleport player's vehicle, which you can actually see these options here in the node browser and properties. So a player and a player position, you can't actually set these in the node properties. You have to pull them in from somewhere else. But the teleport player's vehicle, you can actually set that here on the node itself. And you can set it to false or true or whatever. Only through experimentation will you be able to see which inputs are actually able to be set on the node properties here. Some of them are also broken and bugged, so I'm not sure what... This whole thing is subject to change because some of them are buggy, some nodes don't work the way that you would expect them to work. But you can, on some nodes, you can change the properties or the default values of properties here, or of inputs here. So the teleport player needs a player to be able to teleport something. Well, when a player is spawned, it outputs a player through this little node here. So, we can just connect them together because we want to teleport the player that just spawned. And then now we need a position. It's like, well, how do we get a position? So a position is just an X, Y, and Z value. So it's a vector 3 is what it's called. So it's 3 numbers in a container basically. And you can create your own vector 3 in the script system here by going to variables basic and creating a vector 3. And as you can see, there's an X and a Y and a Z. And what you can do is you take this vector 3, take this vector, and since the position is a vector, see, it says position, so you would assume you'd feed a position into it, but no. Since a position is a vector 3, you can just connect them. It won't let you connect things that aren't a vector. So if I try to see, like, this teleport player's vehicle, is it true or false? It's a Boolean, not a vector, so it won't let you connect. So it might be a little confusing at times. It's like, it's asking for a position, not a vector, but a position is a vector 3. So it's a little hard to understand sometimes. And you sometimes have to think about it and like experiment a little bit and just get kind of familiar with the system. But normally, if something's asking for a position, what they're really asking is for a vector 3. Or a position from another node. A position and vector 3 are basically interchangeable. So what you can do here is in this vector 3, you can actually come into it in hardcode 0. You can just place 0 in all of these things, and you'll basically, this will set the default values for all these vectors to be 0. You can still feed in more information here on the left. So let's say if you wanted to have more code over here to the left or somewhere that actually decides on what position to set it to, you can feed it in. But for now, we're just going to hardcode 000. And with this, it will actually work. So on player spawned, if you follow the code of flow here, which is where the diamonds are, if you follow it, So when a player spawns, we're going to follow this line, we're going to execute this player and also pass along the player to it as well. And then we're going to execute teleport player, and we've passed in the player, and we've also passed in the position 0, 0, 0. And what we're going to do is every time that player spawns, we're going to teleport them there. Or every time a player spawns, we're going to teleport them there. And so if I hit F6 now, inside the editor, you're going to see that I'm going to spawn in the middle of nowhere, because this is 0, 0, 0 on this map. And I'm basically continuously falling to my death and getting teleported back here at at 0, 0, 0. That's why I'm stuck here falling forever, because this is 0, 0, 0, and it's not too great. You know, that's not too great, because obviously, like, you know, 0, 0 is way over there. It's like, how do you know what position is where? Well, you can like select an object. So like, let's say we want to select our little script head here. You can see its position is negative 12,885 in X, Y, and Z. And there's nothing stopping you from coming over here and hard coding those values. I could come in, I could hit R in these, and I could click, and I could put those numbers in that I just said into these values. But that's kind of like, that's annoying, and you don't want to do that. Let's say you want to change the position slightly. You have to come in here and change that. That's really frustrating. But instead, what you can do is you could reference the position of something else, like this pointer. Like I said, we're going to use this pointer later. This is what we're going to use it for. We're going to get this pointer's position and use it as the point to teleport the player to. So let's say we wanted to teleport a player up on this rock somewhere. So like, we're going to come over here and we're going to move it on top of the rock. We'll make it a little, we're right here. We're going to spawn the player, teleport him right here so that he spawns slightly up in the air and falls on the rock. And you can see that the X, Y, and Z values are 13,000, negative 13,000, almost 1,800, and almost 100. So we can actually reference that. Those numbers here at the bottom, when you hit 1, 2, and 3, these the rotation, the position, and the size, it's called a transform. And you can actually see the name as well, like over here in the object properties, it says transform. And you can edit the transform values here as well, like you can, you can edit them manually. So it's called a transform, and in the code, that's actually what we want to get. There's a category for objects called object transform that you can get the transform information. So if we go back into the script here, we want to add a node, over here go back to the top, and it says object transforms, and it says you can see you can set objects positions, and we can also get object position. So there's a node here to get an object's position. So it requires an object input, and it outputs a position or a vector 3. It's like I said before, a position and a vector 3 are the same thing, but it says get object positions, and it outputs a position. Well, we can connect these up. We can connect this up, and it's like it says object here, and it says empty. Well, that's not good. How do you actually reference this pointer to get its position? Well, the way to do that currently, this might change slightly in the future. This is the only way that I figured out how to do it, because it's a little buggy in this build. When Forge actually comes out, it'll be a lot less buggy. Normally what I do is I select the script head and the pointer. And the reason I select the script head is if you have multiple script heads, sometimes when you hit Q and go to enter the node graph, it doesn't go into the right node. So select the script head you want to reference the pointer in, and also select the pointer, go into the node graph, and then when you right click it, you can hit add object references, and it will paste 2 references, one to the script brain, which we don't need because, again, like I said, it's bugged, and this is the only way to get this in reliable. I haven't figured out a way yet. And you can see the output here is a pointer, the name of this object. You can see down here it says pointer. Now, when I add more pointers, it will say pointer 1 and pointer 2. There's currently a bug to where you can't rename objects. In the future, in the object properties here, you're going to actually be able to change the object names. And you're going to want to do this in the future, because you would call this like spawn point 1 or something, or call this something that's more useful than just pointer. Right now, saving is broken, so I'm not going to do it. But you can do it. You can save names. You can also add things to folders and stuff, but we'll get into that later when the actual Forge is out and in a more stable state, because most of this stuff is very broken. So we're going to go back into the script brain here. We have the object reference. Well, this get object position needs an object. And we have the pointer here. Well, there's nothing stopping us from connecting those two because this is an object and this getting object position is asking for an object. So what's going to happen now is that when a player spawns, we're going to teleport the player because we passed that player in and we've told when a player spawns to execute this after it spawns. So follow the code here, follow the triangle. When a player spawns, we're telling it to teleport the player and we're feeding the player that spawned in to the teleport player position, and then we're also getting the position of the pointer that we're referencing over here. Might be a little confusing if you're not familiar with programming or just visual scripting stuff in general, but this is when you see it, when you wire it up and work, it makes perfect sense. Everything's actually quite simple here that I feel like almost anyone could understand this if you give them a few minutes. So what you do now is actually this works. We're getting the position of the pointer and feeding it into here, and it's going to teleport me to this exact position when I hit the play, button. So if I hit F6, we've actually made a mistake. So this is important. I think there's a bug. I think I accidentally dragged multiple. I think I accidentally made I connected too many things together. So make sure that you don't double up drag. I think that's what I did. Because what I think was happening is I clicked and dragged multiple times and I think it bugged out. Again, this is like a small bug that probably won't be a problem. But if it does happen, make sure that you're only, like it says that there were too many node connections. Make sure that you didn't actually double up node connections. That might be fixed in the future. But if you ever get that error, just make sure that you haven't accidentally connected something twice. So now if I hit F6, we teleport exactly where that pointer was. That, like I said, that pointer is invisible when you play, so we can't actually see it. It's basically just a placeholder item for a position right now. So I'm gonna go kill myself, and you're gonna see when I respawn, I'm gonna spawn there. Because it teleports us there every time a player spawns. So here we are back at this. So any player that dies or spawns in a level is gonna spawn right here. And the great thing about doing it this way is, let's say later it's like, oh no, we really don't want it to spawn here. We actually want it to spawn over here, like right next to the lift. And it's like, okay, we'll spawn us at the lift. So now if I come back and hit F6, it's going to spawn me at the lift instead of over there, so that you don't have to go back in to the script, the script brain and actually modify the position. You could just move these pointers around, and it makes it really easy to to keep track of stuff. I don't think the rotation matters right now. It might matter. I don't know if there's a way to set the rotation of a person spawning. We'll get into that later. I'll figure something out, but you can use this as a placeholder to teleport stuff to and from, or use it as a position save. There's a lot you can actually use these pointers in a lot of clever ways right now. Because there's some stuff that is broken that you kind of have to make do with pointers instead of actually saving variables. So I'll get more into the more complicated stuff in a different video. But this is basically the very relatively quick TLDR on how to like get into Forge. Hopefully I wasn't too rambly, but as an overview, a more concise overview. The R key opens up the browser. You can spawn things in by going and selecting an object and spawning them in. You can edit the properties of this object by going to the same menu instead of the object browser, going to the object properties, and you can change the visuals and the textures in the visuals tab. You can change the positions and stuff in the transform tab. You can also change the scale here if it's a static object, so you can't scale dynamic objects. The 1, 2, and 3 keys allow you to change the different ways of interacting with objects when you're not in the properties mode. You can also scale, like I said, scale static objects. And then you can also hit F5 or F5, 5 or 4 to change the view, the movement type view. Sorry, I was having a moment. So you can also change the different if this axis is in line with the world space or the object space, so that you can move objects like up and down in the way that it's facing, or left and right in respect to the world. And then we talked about how to reference objects in code. So let's say we wanted to reference this cube, it would have to be static. So we can't reference a static item, so it has to be a dynamic. And let's say we wanted to reference this inside of our script head, we would select it and the head and open up the node graph, and then we'd right click and we would add object references. And then as you can see here, we have an object reference for a primitive block. And we could actually replace this. We could replace our pointer by right clicking on the node and hitting clear connection, and then dragging this in to replace it. And then if I hit the play button, we're actually going to teleport on top of our block. If this was a bigger block, it might cause issues because this block has physics and you might get stuck in it. But you get an idea of how to import things. I think that basically sums it up. I think my game's about to crash. I'm gonna make some more videos going a bit more in depth on how to actually do some more complicated things. And when a Forge release actually gets more, when a new Forge release comes out and it's less buggy, I'll show some more advanced stuff that I think is really cool. Because I had some video ideas of stuff that don't work currently because some of the functionality is broken. So yeah.